Cash flow is nice. What you really want when growing a business is enterprise value. Cash flow makes you rich. Enterprise value makes you wealthy. How do you do that? We're going to walk through three things in this video, three ways in which you can build real enterprise value in a company while at the same time generating strong cash flow. I'm Arthur Petropoulos, Managing Partner and President here at Hillview Partners. We're a middle market investment banking firm helping companies typically generating between $1 and $20 million a year in pre-tax earnings or EBITDA to sell their companies or to secure capital. So what is the difference? Let's start with that kind of foundational concept. Is the idea of cash flow is, as expected, after all of your expenses, what is the cash that comes out of the business every year? The idea of enterprise value, on the other hand, is how much is the business as a machine worth? And so as you evolve a business, as it grows, and as it continues to throw off cash in a consistent manner, the actual business in itself is worth something, and in many times a very significant amount of money. The vast majority of billionaires, if you will, were not created by cash flow. You don't just get $1 billion by making $2 billion and paying taxes. Most of it is through the accretion or the growth of an enterprise of a business. And so whether it's Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, anybody, right? These gigantic companies, Warren Buffett, the vast majority of these people's wealth were generated through the growth of a business. And so when a business makes consistent cash flow over a certain period of time, all of a sudden that business can be worth 6 times that cash flow as an enterprise, 10 times that cash flow, even more in the public markets. But the idea is that the growth of a business as a business, not just a cash register that you can, or a piggy bank that you can take money out of once in a while, that is the differentiator between oftentimes rich and wealthy. So what are these 3 ways of creating enterprise value in a business? The first of these is having a sales machine. We've talked about it in other videos, but if you want a business that is sellable, that has enterprise value, you must have a sales machine. You must be able to indicate where do you get leads, what is the inputs and outputs of that. So we send this many emails, we have this many phone calls, we do this many LinkedIn messages, we pay this for Google AdWords, we do this for paid ads, or we put out this content. Generally speaking, there's going to be 4 ways of getting leads. You're going to have cold outbound, reaching out to people you don't know, warm outbound, reaching out to people you do know, paying for ads or advertising, and making content. And so all of those avenues, and there's lots of subsections within each and kind of the different attack vectors, again, of whether it's calls, emails, postcards, billboards, whatever it is, but generally falls in those buckets. And you must A, have a defined input output of, we put this in, this is how many leads we get. And then B, you must have a funnel, if you will, for how did that lead turn into a paying customer. And so you say, okay, well, we have this phone call first. We ask for this information after that. We have this follow-up meeting after that. We ask for more information. We have a third meeting. Then we close, right? Or something like that. They talk to us, this is how we pull them through. But the idea is if you want a sellable business that has enterprise value, you must define the inputs and outputs of getting the leads and then the process of a lead turning into a customer. And bonus points, if you know the percentages of everybody coming through the leads, right, in terms of turning into a customer. So we say, okay, 80% of people pass the first hurdle, 30% of people pass the second hurdle, 10% of all leads turn into customers. Because then that creates an equation, right? There's a calculus there. There's something that someone could rely on to say, if you have X dollars going into machine and Y dollars comes out, right? If you could say, we have this many inputs, calls, etc. We have outputs that turn into this many leads. This is the pull through of leads as a percentage. You can then quantify the cost of a customer. Right? And that customer acquisition cost, whatever the phrasing is that someone wants to utilize, that is a key component of an enterprise value, is understanding the sales machine and what it looks like. Number 2, it's having an execution machine. And so this is not an electrical chair, right? But what we mean by that is execution is the actual doing of the stuff. So if you think of the actual process of someone is interested, they become a lead, they then become a customer. Once someone is a customer and they want to buy your service, product, or offering, how do you take them from a person who wants something to a person that has that thing and is happy about it, right? And so if it's a product, how is the product made for them? How is it given to them? What is that customer journey, to steal a phrase from Hermes and Chanel? The idea is, how do they go from being a desirous customer to a happy customer? How do you provide the service? How do you provide the product? You have to have it defined. And the simplest way to define this is what we call like a Gantt chart of, let's say it's a 30-day involvement that you are involved with them, a 90-day thing, 6 months, 10 years, whatever it is, what happens at this day, what happens on this day, what are the different steps of the client journey? How do you determine if they are having a good time or having a bad time? If they like what you're doing, if they don't like what they're doing, how do you retain? What's the churn? There's a lot of different variables, but fundamentally, you must have a definable execution process. Someone wants to buy a cheeseburger. How do you make the cheeseburger? How do you give someone the cheeseburger? How do you make sure it's good? If you can define that, you create enterprise value in a business. So again, now if we can go through steps 1 and 2, we know how to get people to want our stuff, how to turn them into customers willing to buy the things that we are offering, product, service, whatever it may be. And we know how to deliver this stuff in a quantifiable timeline, understanding, again, the economics of it in the sense of they pay us X dollars, it costs us Y dollars to provide the thing, and we know what's left over. And this gets into number 3, which is tracking things and understanding your numbers. So if you want a sellable business, you need to know how to sell and what that machine looks like. You need to have a machine of doing the stuff. And the third is you need to track how profitable or effective you are at doing this. And so if you said, okay, we have a business that sells $20 million of widgets or services, it costs us in the execution of it $10 million to provide the services. We then have $10 million left over, and it costs $3 million to run kind of the core of the business. And we know that we're going to make $7 million of profit. In this situation, that $7 million of profit could be worth $50 to $80 million, depending on the situation, right? And so, but it's only worth that much if everything is crystallized. We have a sales machine, we have an execution machine, and we know how to track it, and we know that it's been performing consistently. That's the third variable, is being able to track things, being able to measure things, and having a predictable path and call it operating infrastructure around things. So to recap, if you want your business to be sellable, if you want it to be valuable, there's many other things that you could talk about, but at its core, people are going to say, how do you get customers? And you have to tell them about your sales machine. Second, how do you provide the product or service that you espouse to be able to provide to your customers that's so much better than everybody else, right? It's a whole different conversation to say, why is it better? But if you have the proof, then it is implicitly better. So you don't, again, I think people focus so much on telling the world why their thing is better. But if you have the sales and you have the execution to prove it, the proof is in the pudding, right? Someone just has to go look as to why it's differentiated. But if you're selling and you're executing, then there's something there that works. And that is defined, if you will, or that is illustrated, right? The picture of it working and how well it works is the third element of it, of how is it tracked? How does it find its way into the financial statements? How are you able to show that it is consistent, predictable, and has a lot of upside potential? That's really the third element of it. And to put a cap on all of this, the nice thing is that all the while you are building enterprise value of your business, you get all of the cash flow too. Right now, some of that cash flow you're going to have to redeploy into growth initiatives to reinvest it in the business, but there's still going to be plenty of cash flow coming out of the business. So if someone says, well, do I want to do this business for cash flow or do I want to do it for enterprise value? The answer is you want to do both. Make lots of cash flow, but make it have these things, right? You need a sales machine. You don't want to just be out there like a cowboy trying to aim at random stuff. Have it be a executable process, right? You are not Mozart making compositions. You are not, Michelangelo painting whatever you feel like painting, although even he had his Renaissance sponsors. But the idea is have a definable path. Someone wants something, here's how they get it, here's how they're happy. The more crystallized, concrete, dependable, reliable, repeatable that is, the better. And third, how do we document, how do we corral, how do we measure, and how do we illustrate? So show me how to sell something. Show me how you do the things after you sell them. Show me how you track all of it and some proof, some receipts as it may be, as to it actually working and both historically at the current present time and into the future. That's a sellable business. That's enterprise value. That's the real prize at the end of everything, in addition to all of the cash flow you generate in the business along the way. So that's the thought for today. I hope the week finishes up well for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. We'll see everyone next time.